Hey, hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is The Other Thing I Do. My guest this week is Brea Grant, an actor, writer, director, and producer who's been having a pretty great year, all things considered. She wrote and starred in Lucky, a very unsettling satire about a woman trying to understand why she's being stalked by the same unknown assailant night after night. And she wrote and directed 12-Hour Shift, which stars Angela Bettis as a hospital nurse having a very long night, doing some very unsavory things. Brea also has a tiny role in Happily from writer-director Ben David Grubinski, friend of the show, and she co-stars in The Stylist, a psychological thriller from director Jill Gevorgesian, which just arrived on Arrow. Brea picked Gremlins 2, The New Batch, Joe Dante's 1990 sequel to his 1984 horror comedy, which picks up 6 years after the scaly green monsters rampage through Kingston Falls. Billy and Kate, still played by Zach Galligan and Phoebe Cates, are adults now, relocated to New York City and working for a Manhattan tycoon named Daniel Clamp. But when Gizmo comes back into their lives and falls into the hands of Clamp's top geneticist, it's only a matter of time before the Gremlins run wild again. And this time, it's weird. If you've seen Gremlins 2, you know what I mean. This is Someone Else's Movie.
You know, I was talking to my fiance about this, about Gremlins versus Gremlins 2, because we joke a lot about Gremlins in our house. And Gremlins 2 had such a bigger impact on me, even though it's a sequel. And I think it's in part due to my age. I was probably more aware of Gremlins 2. I was, 3 years old or something when the first Gremlins came out. Yeah. But also it's just a wild movie. It is a completely insane movie that really stuck with me as a kid. And then I can't talk about it without referring to the Key and Peele sketch that really, I feel like, brought it back into like the zeitgeist of comedy and horror. People wanting to talk about those two things at the same time. And I just thought that sketch was also really funny. But the movie itself is just, I love a feel-good movie. And there was just this era, in the 80s and 90s where there were so many family-friendly genre movies. And, it's this one, it's Neverending Story, it's Labyrinth, and all of these kind of movies that I loved growing up because they were so fantastical, but also they were kid appropriate. Kids could watch them. And I think that was, I loved them. And Gremlins 2 definitely falls into that category.
It's such a unique, even among sequels and even among genre sequels, it is such an odd film, right? I was trying to figure it out. I did an episode on the first film with Ben Blacker maybe 6 months ago.
Oh, cool.
Released it around Christmas, but we sat on it for a while. But it's one of those movies. The sequel was so amazingly polarizing. Because people either loved it because it continued to do the thing that Gremlins did, which is just mock itself, make fun of structure, make fun of the characters, refuse to take itself fully seriously, or they hated it for the same reason, which I found absolutely fascinating.
Right. And I was reading a little bit about it and hadn't thought that much about it, as far as a sequel goes, but I guess what they were trying to do was make the anti-sequel. They wanted to make something that was so bonkers that it was like, it would end the idea of the sequel, which I feel like it almost does because it is a completely insane premise. And everything that happens is completely insane. And I love a movie that, will just make huge, broad choices. I also love a movie where they have a musical sequence in the middle and break out and do a meta thing with Hulk Hogan. Like there's so many crazy things about this movie.
Yeah, the Hulk Hogan one and the Hulk Hogan sequence. I don't know if you ever saw the VHS. If you're young enough, they replaced it. Right, there's a separate sequence with that, which was completely disorienting when I saw it.
Even I rewatched it last night, and the whole thing is disorienting to have it suddenly take you out of the movie. I mean, what a strange choice. But I kind of just appreciate that they were like, well, shoot your shot, man. Like if you're gonna make a weird sequel to a movie that already is sort of doesn't even like the rules are confusing, the rules of the Gremlins it doesn't totally make sense. The Gremlins don't totally make sense. So may as well just like make a wild movie that's a fun ride.
Yeah. And to that end, you have like basically the whole history of Looney Tunes and Warner Brothers and Hammer Horror and everything occupying the same space, fighting for dominance in much the same way the individual gremlins are fighting. So yeah, I'm sorry. I am trying to get my head around how to talk about this film, but it is basically its own Tasmanian devil.
It really is. Well, when I'm rewatching it last night, because I watched it maybe a year or two ago. It was on Hulu or something. And I was like, oh, Gremlins 2, I haven't seen that one in a minute. And I'd forgotten, and then I revisited it, and I had forgotten like it has these huge themes, right? It has themes of like gentrification is like one of the major reasons that, you know, all this comes to play. And then also just sort of like uncontrolled capitalism, like this Trumpian sort of guy at its center is part of the problem as well. And then and then sort of almost an anti-technology sort of space. But it has these big themes that weren't really in the first one. Like they definitely weren't tackling capitalism, like capitalism run amok. Whereas in this one, it's like one of the problems is that they have this animal testing facility and all these things within this one giant tower, which is, you know, I just this horrible, evil place that is basically obviously supposed to be Trump Tower.
Yeah, the idea that, you know, Trump and Elon Musk are somehow the same person in this world, right? And
yeah, pretty much. Who turns out to be like not the worst person at the end of the movie. Like there are worse people working under him, but yeah, he's probably a bad guy. And John Glover is so charming that it's kind of okay, right? Like you get the feeling that he is the person that you want a Trump to be, you know, like sort of disconnected, just happy to put his name on stuff and enthusiastic about building things, as opposed to, you know, like a malevolent narcissistic force of destruction. But right, yeah, well put.
That's me. I'm just reading it. I'm reading it in. But yeah, you said the first one's not really about capitalism, and it doesn't have it as at its forefront. It does have the "It's a Wonderful Life" version of capitalism, right? Like Mrs. Deagle and the loans, and her control over Kingston Falls. But this film transplants the entire narrative of the first movie. Really, I mean, that's the point of it. It's restaging it beat for beat into the big city, into a world that none of the characters we've met before are prepared for fully. And like, it's a smart way of putting Billy and Kate off balance again and making them and challenging them and making them the kids in a world where they're all much older.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like, there's definitely, I mean, just to speak to the capitalist part of it, I think there's such a, like, you know, they're worried about, well, will the people sue them? Not will the people die? You know, like the concerns are very different. And also you have this like very evil place where they're literally firing people for taking too long of breaks. I mean, it is like a very, you know, late stage capitalist issue that's happening here. But definitely, yeah, you're right. And that's, I mean, this is the problem with sequels, right? It's hard to like take these characters who've already experienced something and then make it happen to them once again, which is maybe why we end up with different characters as our leads in a lot of sequels.
Yeah, I mean, horror movies, I never forgot something Anthony Perkins said about Psycho 3. So like, as long as there is the possibility of a sequel, the studio is going to want one. So he got on board a Psycho 3 because it gave him the chance to direct as well, star. But his thing was, what was it? It's like, you know, oh, the cursed thing killed everyone in the house, but the dog survived. The dog could go to another family. We'll follow the dog. Right.
And it's kind of the problem with the final girl in general, right? Because she can survive, so you can always do another, you know, whatever movie. Although my theory is that she would be so traumatized that like she would immediately give up. She's not fighting to the end again. I don't know if I would be.
Oh, that's an interpretation I haven't thought of before. Just surrendering. Oof, there's a meta film in there somewhere, but I don't know that I want to watch just a straight up version of it.
There's a darkness for sure about the, I think the final girl is an unexplored, very dark, traumatic character that we kind of just torture over and over again instead of allowing her to sometimes maybe give up.
Yeah. Oof. Gizmo's kind of a final.
Gizmo is the final girl, kind of. I mean, in fact, Gizmo even has a training sequence in this movie, which is a little bit of a final girl. I mean, it's also maybe, you know, an action movie thing, but it is a little bit of a final girl thing too, where you're almost like prepping the house for like the bad guy to come along at the last minute and like, get him home alone style. But instead he's like literally lifting weights and stuff in this movie.
Yeah, the Rambo stuff is the little bandana too. It felt to me like Joe Dante was very, very specifically saying that he doesn't think Sylvester Stallone is doing all that much to be ready for Rambo. Like this is all it takes. The little guy can do it too.
Oh, wow. You think he was calling out Stallone? That was like his goal?
Maybe lovingly, but I do think there's a definite specificity to the bandana.
For sure. For
but
sure.
It is adorable. Like it's on Gizmo.
Well, it's the one thing I mean, watching this movie, I mean, they did a great job of creating Gizmo, obviously, but also they just even the music and everything, you really do relate to Gizmo. Like you do feel for Gizmo when Gizmo's getting like, taken away and can't get to them on time and all the parts where they're torturing Gizmo. And I remember as a kid that really bothering me when they were torturing Gizmo. I really hated it because I loved Gizmo so much. But yeah, I think they do such a good job in making Gizmo and anthropomorphizing Gizmo. Can you anthropomorphize something that doesn't exist? I'm not sure.
He's pretty anthropomorphic. I mean, for a creature, he's very human. I think that's fair. Ben Blackner and I talked about this in our conversation about the first Gremlins, is that there is something truly awful about watching Gizmo suffer, even though he's not real, and even though he's probably suffering because the effects guys hate the puppet so much at that point in the shoot that they just want to take their frustrations out on it.
That's a good theory. I mean, I care far more about Gizmo suffering than the humans. Like, I'm not concerned about the humans, anyone who seems in danger, but when Gizmo is in danger, I do not like it. It makes me very sad.
No, I get that. Well, it's like watching a dog in danger in a movie. You on some level, or a child actor, like a baby, on some level, that the humans are all consenting to this and they're fine with it. But the pets and the kids, they might not know how fake this is.
Sure.
I always worry.
It's not real. He's not real.
That's right.
So I don't know.
But we project on Gizmo because of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Sweet.
I find that I definitely do. And this was that era in which I wish like there were like the creatures like Gizmo, and also in Neverending Story there was the Luck Dragon, like things that I was like as a kid I was like, but what if those did exist? I would really want one. And I think that was like such a important part of it, is that I just felt close to that thing because it was something I wanted to own. I wanted to be friends with.
I can see that. I mean, there is so much about the appeal of any fantasy movie, right? The idea, especially with kid heroes, that you could be part of it, that you could participate in it. Yeah. And every single person who saw Gremlins, I'm sure, came away thinking they would be better at handling all those rules than Billy and his family, who are kind of terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. Although I in rewatching it last night, spoiler for the ending, anyone who hasn't seen, 30-year-old movie. But I was like, oh, the ending is so not something I would have thought of. Like if given in the situation, or maybe even as a writer, but they really needed that electricity gremlin in order to solve that problem.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is the weirdest one of all. And I mean, obviously that was like a writing device in order to fix that. But I would never, I don't know if I had been in the tower, if I would have thought to kill them all that way.
It is. Yeah, actually, it is one of those things where it only works based on the writers figuring it out in the moment, right? Like, I don't think they teed it up. I can't imagine that was part of it, but it's a good solution. It's very efficient.
Right. And I guess it could have been, maybe they also wrote the vegetable gremlin as a way to like kill everybody at the end, but it was the electricity one that worked better. Yeah. But I think I do feel like maybe it was written in there as a device in order to, melt all the gremlins.
Yeah. How do we end this? Oh, I don't know. One of them could be, no, that's true. I mean, it's not like the Tony Randall gremlin the Brain Gremlin is going to talk them down.
Right. Sure.
He is my favorite.
Gremlin. I kept calling him Brainy Gremlin in my head, but Brain Gremlin's pretty
Brainy Gremlin is good too. I think it is Brain Gremlin. I think the names are really basic. in the credits. But he is my favorite character. He always has been. There is seriously not a week that goes by, especially this year, where I don't quote canned food and shotguns on some level. That is like that is such a wonderful in context line, both for a Gremlins movie and for a movie released in 1990. You know, like I'm advising all of my clients to invest their money in canned foods and shotguns. Still works.
Still works. And, you know, he's right. That's why he's the brainy one. Smart one.
Yeah. And it is what you said, too, about late capitalism, that in 1990, that movie predicted way too much stuff accurately.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's also that late 80s era where I feel like we were thinking a lot about like money, cocaine, and
the building blocks of life.
Yeah, sure. Money, cocaine, and capitalism, the building blocks of life. So I think that like we were tackling that, especially like in a lot of genre things. And maybe there's part of like Joe Dante or something. It was like, this is a money grab. I'm going to tackle capitalism. I mean, maybe that's, you know, part of the fun of making the movie. But yeah,
I think so. Yeah. I mean, certainly taking Warner's money to make a movie about white corporations or the devil.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. But capitalism, I mean, is way out of control now, but definitely we were seeing the early stages of that at that moment. I mean,
oh yeah,
the economy was doing great, but it like in a way that seemed, it was very clear it wasn't going to do so great in a couple of years.
Yeah, the Reagan Revolution was already over and the meltdown was coming. I mean, and we will absolutely circle back around to 12-hour shift because I think there's a real through line here.
It's basically trying to make Gremlins, but with nurses.
Which, again, I would watch that.
Okay.
But the idea, too, that as soon as Gizmo is revealed in any universe, in a small town, in a big city, the first thing people want to do is sell him or merchandise him, monetize him. That feels like a commentary on the doll culture of the time as well.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. Poor Gizmo. I mean, they want to sell him or experiment on him, which I don't think is wrong. I think that is exactly what would have happened. Like if we found a Gizmo, a Gizmo-like creature, any sort, yeah, humans are horrible. We would definitely sell him to the highest bidder who would then, you know, try to figure out how to make another one to sell more, which means they would probably, you know, do a bunch of experiments on him. That is, I mean, look, I've been a vegetarian for many years. I think this is an animal rights issue. And I think that and I'm on board for what they're preaching.
You're not wrong. In any of that, it is an animal rights issue, but it's also a morality thing and the fact that we don't have any as a species.
Yeah, which this movie really shows. I mean, the only characters with any sort of morality are our main characters, really. I was laughing to myself about the Marla character, the lady boss.
Oh, Haviland Morris, who's so much fun.
So good. I'd watch that spinoff in a heartbeat. Like whatever her life is that led to this moment where she's walking around smoking with this accent and then hitting on anything that moves. All the women in this movie are horny. It's just her. The horny lady gremlin, and that's pretty much it. But I just love the idea of this like 90s, late 80s, 90s, like business lady. And like to get ahead, you have to be like hard and tough and you smoke cigarettes and you got strong opinions and, you know, and you're not scared of your sexuality. Like it's like such a weird time. And we were supposed to buy her, which is very funny.
Yeah. I didn't see her as, I mean, she's adversarial, but she's not the villain of the piece.
She's not the villain, but I think she's villainous. She's trying to break them up as a couple. She doesn't care that he has a girlfriend. And then she's just basically doing anything she can to get ahead. I mean, she gets a nice ending, which is good. But I don't know if she's a character we're really rooting for. Do you think she is?
No, I mean, no. I mean, certainly within her world, like she thinks she is. But
sure. Yes.
The movie, yeah, no.
Her spinoff would be great. I'm like,
yeah.
That would be, yeah, of course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She's the Judge Reinhold for this movie. She's the one who's there to sort of be a dick, but not actually harm anyone. Because
that's true. And you don't get the lady dick in a lot of movies. It's always some dude, you know, with a preppy, you know, collared shirt or something. Instead, we have like a lady in a it's not even a pantsuit. It's like it's like a skirt, like a long 80s skirt.
It's a shoulder pad warrior. I don't know how to describe it.
So many shoulder pads in this movie, actually. Yeah. So much fashion happening.
Yeah, we have in some ways evolved a little bit, but that's just because everybody's wearing sweats and pajamas these days. I
really am not looking forward to a time in which we have to go back and wear pants, real pants.
Yeah.
Skirts? Ugh, gross.
I get dressed every day just because that way I'm not devolving into the writer stereotype, which I am anyway. I mean, I've worked from home my entire life. I'm built for this. But yeah, no, it feels like if I let that one thing go out, the whole thing, it's not like I'm wearing a suit or anything, but if I don't put pants on in the morning, the whole world is going to end. My world will slide straight to chaos.
Yeah. I mean, most of my work I do from home anyway. So it wasn't that different, but I have given a little bit up. I'm wearing jeans today, but I have given up a little bit, and I did order a lot more sweatpants online recently because I just was like, well, this is where I'm at for a long time. I may as well be comfortable, and I've gained enough weight during all of this. I feel like I should be wearing sweatpants because my pants are kind of not fitting so great.
That's fair. I'm currently, it's so cold here that I'm actually wearing like heat tech insulated jeans from Uniqlo, which feel like pajamas. So I feel like I'm winning, even though I look like I'm dressed.
I will check that out.
They're all artificial fibers, which brings us back to Gremlins too. It's a film that celebrates that sort of perversity, though. The idea that if you are the hero of your own story, you can do whatever you want. And then in the corner, there's Billy and Kate, who are trying so hard to preserve their small town values to the point where they seem like absolute hicks. But it's charming. I think the biggest problem I have with the first movie is that you can't tell how old they're supposed to be. Like, did they go to college and come home? Are they just out of high school? Are they still in high school? It's really vague. And here, it's 6 years later, they acknowledge the time has passed and they're allowed to be adults.
Yeah. I recently read the script for the first one, and the original script, or there is a script floating around. It's very different than the movie. Mm-hmm. And I think in the script, it was clear they were in high school. Don't quote me on that. But
well, it would make sense. I mean, like, Billy's first impulse is to go see his high school science teacher. Like, there's a lot of stuff that seems to suggest they're younger than they seem to be.
Right. And in this, it's more of like they're trying to make it. They can't get married yet because he doesn't have the money, which I love. That is like a weird, like, why? I think that's supposed to make us love them more, that they can't get married until he gets this promotion or whatever, which is such like, that's not an 80s way of thinking. That's like a 1950s way of thinking.
Yeah. But that's where they came from, right? Like in Kingston Falls, it's still kind of 1952. And you get the feeling that they themselves haven't come that much further, which would make me assume New York will eat them any day now.
Sure. Yeah. It's wild that they even moved to New York. I mean, I don't even know. I think it's a bad move for them in general. They should not have gone to New York. It's too scary. People are wearing crazy shoulder pads and weird hats. And there's literal scientists trying to like create, I don't know what, like in the same building. It's a crazy world, too crazy of a world for them.
Yeah. Also, let's talk about Christopher Lee and the joy he brings to that role. Sending up his entire career as a hammer heavy, just goofing around with it. He was this massive, imposing figure of horror films, and also just in general. Apparently, I think he was 6'4" or something. He was very tall. And Dante clearly just loves him because he lights him to take advantage of his jawline and his forehead and all the shadows around him, to the point where I think he ends up in that big impressionist, like, German expressionist spider's web thing. And the movie is just saying, isn't this great? Look who he is. How much fun are you having? And I'm wondering how that played for kids, like for a younger audience. Cause I was 22 when I saw the movie. I knew who he was.
No, I mean, I know who he is now,
right?
But as a kid, that would not have, well, so I think that what is so great in some ways about these movies for kids and all these kind of darker genre movies is that it's very clear delineation of who's the good guy and who's the bad guy, right? And so I think for me that like the 80s bad guy is so clear. Like it's so clear. He's mean, he experiments on animals, or he bosses around his subordinates, or he's mean to the workers or whatever. And like in the same way that Disney movies almost do this, right? Where we're like, oh, the hunter is bad, not Bambi. And like, it's just very clear, black and white, who we're supposed to like and who we're not supposed to like. And these movies did a similar thing. And I think that's just the way I interpreted those movies. Like 80s bad guys have a look.
Yeah.
They all have the same hair. Like, like they all went to the same barber, and it's the same clothes for the most part. I mean, some exceptions in this movie, obviously, but usually, yeah, they have a popped collar, or they have they're picking on our hero in some way, shape, or form. The whose side you're supposed to be on was very clear, and I think there's like comfort to that as a kid, right?
Yeah. And this is absolutely made for children to enjoy as much as adults. Like, I think the first film walks a really interesting line between genuine horror and family adventure, right? That it's why they invented the PG-13 rating, that and Temple of Doom were the two films that freaked everybody out so much they needed to come up with a new classification. But it's just the escalation of intensity that started with things like Jaws or Star Wars or Close Encounters, where, I mean, those can be, well, maybe not Star Wars so much, but Close Encounters and Jaws are definitely horror adjacent, especially in the first hour of Close Encounters. And it just kept going. And so with this one, it feels very much to me like Dante is aware of it and pulling back. Like, even the gore is comical. There's no sense of real threat. And because there's already been a Gremlins movie, the audience is just assuming, nobody's really going to get hurt. Only the bad people ultimately will be punished, and Gizmo will be fine because he's a perfect little doll man and no one wants anything bad to happen to him. But to the Gremlins can do as much damage to each other as they want, and they always do.
We will put them in a paper shredder and have no regrets. Sorry, there's an ice cream truck that comes around my house.
What's that with that?
Yeah, it's going to go for a long time. Just
fine. I like the idea that nature is returning.
Every day, sometime between now and 5 p.m. it comes and sits outside my house.
Barely hear it. Don't worry about it.
Okay, good. All right. I feel like that the movie, in some ways, it's rebellious, not in its gore or in its horror. It's rebellious in like its structure and its choices, right? It's the literally putting Malton in it and doing the thing where you cut to the theater and doing things where it's such winks to the audience that I feel like that was, for all of us like genre filmmakers, we're always trying to like do something a little rebellious and a little like, look at me, I'm bucking the system or something. And I feel like that was the way they were doing it, instead of, and poking fun too. The whole sequence in the yogurt shop where they're like, is this natural? And I'm like, oh God, we're like, this is current. This is a current joke that they're making. Is like, they're just making fun of people we know. They're making fun of Los Angelinos or New Yorkers. And that's sort of the fun, I feel like, in the movie. And then all the stuff that kids can relate to, like, exploding a gremlin somehow. Or
yeah, it's true. It's just as satisfying for the parents to get the social satire in, and then for the kids to just enjoy the chaos. Although I have to admit, as a grown-ass man, the chaos is really fun. I can lose myself in that.
Absolutely. The moment that vegetable gremlin pops out of a salad bar, I'm in. I'm excited. That's very funny to me still to this day. It makes me giggle. I laughed out loud a couple times watching it. And I think that this is why I wanted to pick this movie, is because I don't feel like I see as many of these movies anymore like this, because the equivalent almost is like a Marvel movie or something, right? Where you can bring kids, you can bring adults, everyone likes it, but there's no satire in them, for the most part. And there's no tongue in cheek, and there's very few winks to the audience. And there's very few like elevation of, like, there is something intelligent about this movie in some ways. I mean, yes, is there like a gargoyle gremlin? Yes. Is there a lady gremlin with giant lips that's ridiculous? Totally silly. But there's also stuff that I'm like, oh yeah, they're taking Trump down a notch. He's taking capitalism down a notch. And I think I miss some of that, like some of the intelligent, like, underlying choices in some modern day movies.
Yeah, you don't see it very often.
For the family movies, for the movies that are like both, they're kind of for everyone. I mean, I think Pixar is maybe doing some of that, but they aren't horror.
Yeah, no, it's emotional subtext rather than like political or social subtext. When Pixar does something like Inside Out is absolutely a movie about depression and the importance of having varied experiences. I'm trying to figure out a way to say that doesn't sound like I'm somehow diminishing mental health issues, but it's about understanding that those issues are part of who we become. Or Finding Dory, where you realize, oh, somebody at Pixar has a kid with special needs, and this is what that is about. And it's about the challenges the parents face because that's the perspective they have. But I'm trying to think of there's a film called Vampires versus the Bronx that hit Netflix last year. Sarah Gadon's in it, and it's about gentrification and vampires. It's basically the same thing as Fright Night. Someone really attractive moves in and takes over, but they're a vampire. And it's a pretty clever way through that. And I was surprised again, like, I don't think I'd seen a movie that dealt with both of those issues, both the horror issue and the gentrification issue in as fluid and fun a way since Attack the Block. And that's maybe 2011.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is a great movie. But again, not necessarily one you would like take kids to. And that's like I think finding like these dark family movies, I think I miss them in a way.
Yeah, I think they've disappeared. I mean, I think they're being made in Europe still, where there's a market. But America North America has been eaten by the megaplex experience of, see something in IMAX and 3D to justify the ticket price. Otherwise, why even bother?
But I would pay so much for a ticket price right now. Like give me, I would pay in a quarantine situation, would pay so much to go to the movies right now.
Oh yeah. It's nothing. I want nothing more. I teased 12-hour shift as a corollary to Gremlins 2, which sounds weird coming out of my mouth, but you're not wrong. Like, it is a Gremlins movie with nurses. It is about the way people are pitted against each other. And then they just start doing it for fun, I think, or perversity anyway, which is kind of a Gremlins-y thing to do.
A little bit. And not only that, but if you get them wet and then they turn into these horrible people and you can't feed them after midnight. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think I lean towards fun. That's me as a person, but also me and my writing. I mean, I have some dark stuff that I've written, but this one especially, like, I think really tapped into my my playfulness in the dark space. I like playing around in things that are dark, and I think Gremlins is one of those. It is a dark. These are horrible little monster creatures, and they're coming, and they're gonna try to marry you if you're a hot dude and they're the lady gremlin. Like, they're very horrifying, and I think that part of me just likes playing in that space. So I'll take it. I'll take a Gremlins 12-hour shift comparison. The
one thing that's missing is the Lincoln birthday monologue. I was trying to figure out if there's something in 12-hour shift that's like that, but there really isn't. And there shouldn't be, really, because when it shows up in Gremlins 2, again, half the audience was totally into it. And I thought it was the funniest thing in the movie. And everybody else the other half is just like shooting daggers at the screen with their eyes.
I wish I could have seen Gremlins 2 in a theater when I was more aware. I don't know if I saw it in a theater. I'm not sure. Maybe I did, but I would have been young. So it's like hard to remember. It's more of something I watched on television.
Yeah. It still plays though. I gotta say, watching it again, it's just like, I don't think we ever gave Phoebe Cates enough credit for either of the speeches. Like in the first one, she sells it.
Well, I was going to say in anything she does, she's so great. We don't give her enough credit as an actress in general. She's been in some of like the most, important coming of age movies, I feel like, for me. And I often don't think about her, as an actress these days. And I'm now rewatching that. I was like, Phoebe Cates, like, let's call her up. Let's put her in something. Like, she seems like she's someone who would be very cool. I will say a correlation between these two movies, this movie and 12-Hour Shift, both have musical numbers in the middle, which I love. So I feel like that is there's a New York, and 12-Hour Shift has a bunch of nurses breaking into song into a religious song in the middle of killing people. So
yeah, it's true. It does. It's, if nothing else, it's a statement of intent, right, from the filmmaker. It's the elasticity and the sense of play. I saw something. Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar has a musical number
I think that's two. I just watched it as well.
Well, there's like 1.5, right? Because there's the welcome to the hotel thing, but Edgar's prayer, which just, again, seeing it in here, jaw dropping and on point. Like it does it. It goes for it, and it plays with its credibility and everything else. And the lyrics are just off enough that you suddenly, oh, of course, Will Ferrell produced this. Like, of course he would respond to this pitch.
Yeah, and I wonder. I mean, I assume that was in the script when it was made, and I'm assuming that's why. I don't know that actor's name, but it's such a crazy role for him.
Oh, Jamie Dornan.
Yes, such a crazy role for him. I'm like, of course, this guy signed on to do this completely wild, bizarre, against type role for him. But yeah, I think that sense of play, and I mean, one of the things I love about movies and books and all sorts of media, but particularly movies, is an escape from my reality, which is what I really want at this moment during quarantine. Which is why I think Barb and Star coming out was so great, because I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to rent that. Like, that seems like so silly and fun, and escaping from my immediate surroundings of this living room that I've been in for the past year. But I'm already, I mean, before all of this, I was drawn to that kind of media. Like, that's kind of what the kind of movies I want to watch. It's the kind of movies I want to make, is these ones that sort of take our reality and run with it, even though dealing with like cool issues and talking about stuff that's relatable, but like put that shit in space too. Like, I mean, like, or make it be a bunch of gremlins, like make it be about this relationship or relying on yourself or whatever the themes are, or anti-capitalism, but also make there be gremlins there.
Yeah, I mean, where would you? This is actually a perfect setup for that question. Where would you take Gremlins 3? Because Ben had some ideas, and I'm curious to see what you're thinking.
Yes, Ben and I need to, come together on this, because maybe Ben and I can pitch this. I mean, Gremlins in space, that's always a great place to go. When you run out of sequel ideas, you throw it into space just to see what happens. And I love a good sci-fi book or a movie. Where would I take Gremlins to?
Yeah, you have to save space for the fourth movie. That's the rule. Leprechauns, Hellraisers, it's always the fourth one.
I'm not totally sure. I feel like we've done it. The thing about this sequel is it's the cabin in the woods of sequels, right? It is the you've ended what sequels are with this sequel. Yeah. We did everything. If you were like wondering if we're going to make a spider gremlin, like, it's done, like all of the gremlins, not only did they come back and they caused chaos, they all got their own individual personalities and storylines. And the only thing I'd really like to see is maybe some of them come back and see what that spinoff is for that vegetable gremlin or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Like a WandaVision thing where we just get different episodes, different textures, different genres. I'm into it. Or follow Marla, like what a like an Ally McBeal show with Marla.
Would watch it in a minute, in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I'm down for that. We've kind of touched on it. The final question on the podcast is always, is there anything of this film that you've used or lifted or stolen outright? And the mania is there, and the musical number, but is there something else? Have you tipped a hat in a specific way?
I'm trying to think. The 12-hour shift, I think that's pretty much it. I also wrote this film called Lucky that is coming out, and I'm trying to think if there's any sort of correlation there. It's not really, except that it's also a satire. I mean, I think I am drawn. This is much bigger, but I think I am personally very drawn to like taking a genre that's already been really established, something like, like Gremlins, and then just really turning it on its head, which this sequel really did. And something I wanted to do with Lucky was take the slasher idea and kind of make it a little meta and say, like, we're talking about violence against women really in these slasher movies, but like, what if we really talked about it? Like, what if we actually like pushed that and what would it look like to be these women? And kind of make a bigger statement about, obviously women, violence against women, like in our culture. And so I think like very strange comparison, but I think both of those movies are in some ways satires of the movies we've already seen, or at the very least, taking that idea and shooting it to the moon.
Oh, they're definitely in conversation with them. Yeah. Like,
Sure.
You've not full on. I mean, they are full on satire. Yeah, it is. It's just like, it didn't, I guess 12 Hour Shift didn't strike me as a satire until about 25 minutes in, when it's just like the penny drops and you're like, oh, I got it. And I love that.
It's a comedy for sure. I call it a workplace comedy when people ask me what genre it is.
Sure.
Or a nurse-ploitation movie, which my brother's a nurse, and that's what he started calling it. And I agree with that. But Lucky, I do think is a satire for sure. I think it's straight away a satire. When people watch it, I think they tend to agree.
My thanks to Brea Grant, whose latest films Lucky and 12 Hour Shift are now available to stream and very much worth checking out. Lucky is on Shudder, and 12 Hour Shift is now streaming on Hulu in the US and on VOD platforms in the US and Canada. The Stylist is also streaming on Arrow's platform. Thanks also, again, to Kayla Heyer. She knows what she did. Brea's not on Twitter, but you can keep an eye on Lucky through its production company, Ilium Pictures, all one word, and you can find Gremlins 2 on Blu-ray and DVD from Warner Home Entertainment. It's also available on Apple TV and Google Play, and streaming on Crave and Amazon in Canada if you have a Star subscription. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com, where I'm hosting a bunch of podcasts these days and writing the weekly Now Streaming newsletter. I even mentioned Lucky in there a couple weeks back. You can subscribe to that at nowtoronto.substack.com, and you can find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or wherever you've been enjoying us. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're there. Stay inside, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out. I'll see you next time.